On October 3rd of 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson of the United States of America signed the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, also known as the Hart-Celler Act, which abolished the previous National Origins Act and the Immigration Act of 1952, forever changing the way America is today. Opening doors and opportunities. How the Hart-Celler Act of 1965 molded a more diverse America. Now we bring ourselves to before the National Origins Act. There was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which prevented all immigration of Chinese laborers. This was in addition to the Page Act of 1875, which stopped all Chinese women from immigrating to the U.S. After this came the National Origins Act of 1924, which was put in place to regulate immigration from different countries, with a specific interest in more immigration from England, Germany, Ireland, and other similar countries. The reasoning behind this was that people from a similar culture and governing would adapt to the way of life in the U.S. faster and easier, therefore creating less political stir. For example, during the 1920s, the total immigration from Eastern Europe was 3,731,327 people, and the number of people immigrating from Asia was 237,950. That's just one example of the imbalance. Right before the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 came the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952. The 1952 Act was an alteration to the National Origins Act. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952 gave priority to those with special skills, such as degrees in science or engineering, while still focusing on country of origin. During the Civil Rights Movement, or the early 1960s, there was much push for reform, as many people found the National Origins and the Act of 52 just as racist as the things the Civil Rights Movement was at the time fighting against. One of the people who agreed with this was the current president, John F. Kennedy himself. This led to President Kennedy himself giving a speech on the matter in June of 1963, even calling it intolerable. So around two years later, on October 3rd of 1965, at the foot of the Statue of Liberty, President of the United States of America, Lyndon B. Johnson, signed the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act, otherwise known as the Hart-Celler Act. This act abolished the previous immigration laws, including National Origins and Immigration Act of 1952. In other words, it prevented the prohibition of naturalization based on country of origin. This law also formed the 7-category priority system for immigration, most of which we still use today. It was mainly focusing on bringing in people with relatives already in the U.S. and people who possess special skills or trades that would help the economy of the U.S. So how did this affect us in the short term? Like many things in immigration, there was not an immediate kick-in. Still, we can make a comparison of the number of people who immigrated to the U.S. from around 15 years before the Hart-Celler Act and 15 years after the Hart-Celler Act. For example, in 1950, 249,187 people immigrated to the USA. In 1980, 524,259 people immigrated to the U.S. Another prime example of a broader switch would be that in 2017, the top countries in which people immigrated from to come to the U.S. were Mexico, Cuba, then China. In 1920, it was most likely that an immigrant would be from somewhere in Europe, as I stated earlier, from somewhere like England, Germany, or Ireland. So how has the U.S. as a nation really changed? Was it all for nothing? And was Lyndon B. Johnson right when he said, "This is not a revolutionary act"? No. Let's walk the streets of New York, shall we? Imagine it's a bright and sunny day out and you're taking a nice stroll. Look around. Do you think everyone around you is one tone? One race? Most likely not, because this changed the world and this broke barriers. This opened doors. In 1960, 74.5% of the immigrants to the U.S. were from Europe. Asia held 5%, The Americas had 19.1, Africa at 0.4, and 1% other. However, in 2013, Europe held 10.6, Africa with 5.4, and Asia with a much increased 31.2. 52.2 to the Americas and 0.6 to other. Do you see the shift? This world, our world, has changed so much in such little time. The U.S. has gone through such extensive reforms, and many of them have benefited us, and many of them haven't, yet we still always push through. The U.S. of today is the most diverse version of the U.S. throughout history, and I imagine that we will continue to grow and diversify as a country. And so will the world, one small act, voice, and motion at a time. Thank you.